Beast Machines episode reviews now continue with The Strike, Sparkwar Part 1. We are basically in the final stretch now. We are in the first of two final three-parters for this series, and then only one episode in between. From here on out is essentially one long-running storyline with no real deviation, wasted time, or anything. So, the last week of these episode reviews is just going to be one big, old, intense story, so buckle up. This is going to be an interesting ride. So, we start this episode with, there's one main point to this episode. There's one main point to this episode, that is the introduction of new Vehicon generals. There's a bit of a B-plot involving our new Maximal. Beyond that, because Botanica is still finding her place in this war. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So, more importantly, the episode does begin with the same old thing. Maximals running from Vehicons, etc., etc. The only difference now is that the Maximals are way better at handling the drones, and with just Thrust trying to man all of them at once, there's just no way he can put up any kind of serious offense against the Maximals. So at this point, it's getting pretty pathetic. He really is. Both from the Maximals as well as from Megatron, he's just getting the Waspinator treatment, which, yeah, that's kind of appropriate given his origins. But it really does show a lot. For just how far down the character has fallen. He's close to comic relief at this point. And in some situations he still is, but give it a bit. Thrust is going to have one last nice showing before we get to the end of the whole thing. So we'll wait for that. But for now, yes, he's getting clowned, to the point where Rat Trap is now collecting his parts the same way Rat Trap collected Waspinator's parts in the original show. I have a screenshot of it in the scroll here, where they've literally come up with a towing sled for spare parts. There it is. I mean, it's funny that a part of this is because of just them having to recycle elements for the sake of budget in the animation for this show, but it also puts a little bit of fun characterization to Rat Trap again. Puts a little bit of his original element in there too. I like that. I will say, during Megatron's depiction in this episode, he kind of goes... They kind of remind you that he's just a spark living in a data stream at this point. But for whatever reason, they go from that ghostly version of his head to just a version of the Grand Mall with matrix coding going over it. It's weird. To just randomly switch up the depiction of what Megatron looks like. In the debate between Megatron and Thrust, basically Megatron reprimanding Thrust for failing again. Thrust actually makes a really good point. Megatron screwed up when he chose those sparks. It was in and of itself, it wasn't a bad idea, because using the sparks of the Maximal's friends would make them a lot more hesitant to actually confront and harm the Vehicon generals. Okay, that actually worked out. But because he picked sparks that would naturally oppose Megatron, aside from his own, that led to not only Tankor's attempted uprising, and it led to Jetstorm being remodeled into Silverbolt. Yeah, Megatron, the ever logical calculating machine in this series, miscalculated very poorly and basically just flat out screwed up. So we are left to this current situation. Don't worry, Megatron has a fix. 2 new sparks, 2 new generals, Strika and Obsidian. And the portrayal for these two is actually really good right off the bat. During their actual introduction, they're silent. We don't really get any feel for their character right away. So when they start chasing after the Maximals, screaming Terminate and Obliterate, you just kind of get the vibes of Tankor. They just kind of come across as dumb drones. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good trick for the audience, as well as a good trick for the Maximals to make them think that, okay, just because, like, okay, it's the same old drones, same old techniques and tactics. Yeah, not a big surprise, right? Big surprise. Big surprise is here. Obsidian and Strika are far more calculating. So, according to the limited lore we got on these two, because of course these are not vintage characters, they are survivors of 1,000 wars, and they won them all. So, somewhere during the Great War between Autobots and Decepticons that raged for like 9 million years or something crazy like that, or during the 300 years of apparent peace that we have had in between Beast Wars and G1, apparently 1,000 other wars were fought at some point that we just never heard about. It's the kind of thing that just kind of make up off the top of their heads to sound really cool. Oh, yeah, they fought in 1,000 wars and won them all. And that sounds cool. That sounds really cool. Makes them seem silly when they lose their first fight. So that is a factor here. But it does actually work for them. Like they're trying to, like, even if it doesn't fit canonically, even if you cannot like figure out exactly how that makes sense, I mean, it still makes them seem imposing and intimidating, and that's what they are. Like when they keep flanking the Maximals, when they keep cutting off their escape routes, it actually does feel like they've paid attention to how the Maximals behave during Viacon encounters, and they actually do something about it. Like, that's actually really, really good. So, yeah, they come across like exactly how they need to be. Cold, calculating, efficient, everything Megatron could have ever hoped for. And more importantly, just really, really imposing and intimidating. It's exactly what the Viacons have needed for basically the entirety of Season 2. And it's not just them spinning their wheels. It's not just them just like being fodder for the Maximals to blow up. It takes Botanica to actually get them out of that situation, because she's still an unknown variable to the Viacons in general. They just haven't had enough time to study her, so they weren't really prepared. So they get around that. It does leave a few questions. One, why did Megatron wait this long? We only have 6 episodes after this to have the new generals, and the final episode is not going to feature them. So think of how big of an impact that Strika alone has left on Transformers. She only exists for 6 episodes. That's it. Like, that's bizarre. That's kind of bizarre when you start thinking about the numbers behind it, isn't it? But, like I said, it takes Botanica and her abilities to actually save the day. The B-plot of the episode is Botanica struggling to figure out where her place in the war is. She wants to be a pacifist. She wants to be just a scientist developing the plants and making sure Cybertron's organic core can regrow. And she doesn't want to involve herself in the battles. But that does leave the Maximals at a severe disadvantage. When you're literally the only ones left on the planet to stop this overwhelming force, you need every person you can get your hands on. So when one of them is refusing to do anything, that makes things kind of difficult. So unfortunately, it raises tension between them. It causes, guess what? It's our favorite. This is our favorite. It causes infighting, because you couldn't really have a new Maximal show up without everyone finding a reason to get angry at her. It takes intervention from the Oracle. She has a spark vision that includes the same flashback footage that we've seen like 3 or 4 times already in this series, to show her like what happened in the war, how serious the Megatron problem is. I mean, it's a very, very quick way of like showing her that she cannot stick to pacifist scientific beliefs. She has to get her hands dirty in the war, because if they don't have every chance of winning that they can, then they are hopeless. And that being one of the few Maximals still on the planet functioning means she has a responsibility. It's a very Spider-Man situation. Great power, great responsibility. And if you have the ability to do something and you do nothing with it, then you are just complacent. I think a lot of people have fought for causes with that exact same mindset. So yeah, it doesn't take much. I mean, it's a vision from the Oracle. Like it's the kind of thing that completely changed Primal's characterization. So yeah, I guess big spiritual experiences like that could kind of shift your attention just a little bit. So yeah, she comes around, she rejoins the group, and yeah, everything comes across pretty well. So overall, this episode gets two very important things done. We finally get new Viacon generals that are exactly what the show needs. A brand new serious threat. We get some characterization for a brand new Maximal, and we figure out what makes her tick and where her place is in this whole struggle. There's even a little bit of levity in there with Thrust. Like overall, I'm going to give the episode an enjoyable rating. For Beast Machines, I think it's one of the better written and better constructed episodes. The new characters are good. The characterization for Botanica works. And yeah, aside from just a few things that are a little bit typical of the series at this point, yeah, this is actually a pretty solid showing for the series. So that is The Strike, Sparkwar Part 1. Will Part 2 manage to keep up this flow of good Beast Machines content? Tune in tomorrow. You're going to find out.
We're going to have to get your names for the books. You, Pale 1.
William Current.
Roll me a deception check.
I thought their name was Pain.
Roll a disadvantage.
Okay.
That was like the opposite of the help action there. You, Goblin.
First name D's.
Watch your tongue.